We are continuing our study in Matthew chapter 5 in the Beatitudes. Thus far, we've seen Jesus say, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." And then he says, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted." And what we see in both of these things is that they highlight the brokenness, the sinfulness, and the neediness of man. We look inside of ourselves and we see our own sin and our own corruption and our own brokenness. And we look outside of ourselves and we see a world full of death and disease and corruption. And the solution that Jesus provides for these problems is not simply to be a good person and to have a good attitude. It is a call to acknowledge our own emptiness and our own insufficiency. It is a call to acknowledge that the world is broken and that we cannot fix it. It's a call to acknowledge that we are powerless to do and to repair the problems in the world. And when we are brought low and we are humbled under the heaviness of life, we are made to be meek. And thus Jesus says, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." And if we look, we see that there's a progression in the Beatitudes as one gives way to another. Proud and self-righteous people who have it all figured out will not be meek people. But those who are poor in spirit, who are broken, will be meek. They will not think too highly of themselves, and they will not regard the praise of people. It's true that to the flesh, at times, meekness will look like weakness. The meek will look like those who get trampled on, like those who don't get what's theirs and they get taken advantage of. But while those who think according to the flesh see meekness as weakness, in reality, meekness speaks of a far greater strength than any self-asserting pomp or pride. It's that inner quiet strength which does not seek its own. It does not demand to be respected by others and to be praised and approved. Meekness does not assert its rights, but it willingly lays them down for the good of others. It willingly suffers wrong and forgives and does not seek to avenge itself. Meekness is gentle and it is kind. And this attitude comes from an accurate knowledge of self as a sinful creature and an accurate knowledge of God as the holy creator. It is humbled before who God is and who we are. And it results in a person that is humble and lowly. Spurgeon once said, "If any man thinks ill of you, do not be angry with him, for you are far worse than he thinks you to be." And meekness not only looks back at our own sinfulness and our own ruin, but it looks forward with firm confidence that God will make good on all of his promises to us. We know that we will gain heaven in a life to come, so we are free to lose the world in this life. We do not need the wealth of this world because we have eternal riches which are infinitely more precious. We do not need man's approval and acceptance because we have God's acceptance. This creates a person with a humble indifference to the things of this world, because all the riches of this world and all the esteem do not compare to being called a child of God. So the Christian can be liberated from these things. And while you look at history and the world around us, it often seems like it's not the meek who inherit the earth. We see that it's men like Genghis Khan and Alexander the Great and the Caesars of Rome and even the Hitlers and Stalins who come to take dominion of the world, and they acquire wealth and power by oppressing others. But Jesus says, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." And of course, he's not talking about this life in this world, but the earth to come, the new heavens and the new earth. And I I think that if we would just stop and take a few minutes and maybe even a few hours to think about heaven, that for every minute we spend thinking about heaven, we would probably spend an hour less thinking about this earth. And this is where Jesus wants to be, with our hearts and our affections set on the earth to come, so that we are free to give and to live as humble, self-sacrificial people. And I pray that this is what God would make us to be.